Hey guys, tonight we're headed straight into the sun-soaked heart of ancient Persia, where the desert heat is enough to melt your sandals before lunch. You stand barefoot on a baked earth path, the horizon shimmering like a mirage. And the only thing louder than the cicadas is your own boiling brain. It's 45 degrees Celsius out here. Shade is a rare and precious commodity. And, well, you probably won't survive this without some ancient engineering tricks. Luckily, the Persians were brilliant, ingenious. In fact, long before the first air conditioner sputtered to life, they had already figured out how to cool down entire buildings using nothing but earth, wind, water, and a little bit of geometry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere particularly hot or cool tonight, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where this sleepy little history club reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift your head. The heat shimmers off the hard-packed road, distorting the desert skyline into a watery illusion. But through the glare, you notice something remarkable. An elegant adobe home, standing calmly against the blaze. Its thick walls seem to drink in the sunlight without complaint. Its windows are small, shaded, almost suspiciously cool looking. There's no smoke rising, no buzzing fans, or clunky machinery. And yet step inside, it's cooler than your grandma's basement in December. This is ancient Persia. And somehow, this place has beaten the sun. Here, in what is now modern-day Iran, humans learned not just to survive in the desert, but to thrive in it. We're talking vast empires Qanat, Parthian, Sassani have built across the scorched lands between the Zagros Mountains and the Persian Gulf, and even in the searing heat. They had functioning cities, green gardens, chilled drinks, and restful sleep. You wander further, the hem of your robe brushing dust as you follow a scent of rosewater through a narrow alley. A merchant pours water into a shallow clay bowl outside his shop, not for drinking, but for cooling. The sun hits it, the water slowly evaporates, and the air above it subtly drops in temperature. No one rushes. The day bends around the heat like a sleepy cat curling into shade. Historians still argue whether Persian cooling methods were more practical or ceremonial. Were they a matter of comfort, or deeply tied to notions of hospitality, power, and purity? The truth is probably a mixture of all three. Okay, we'll stroll through it all. Let's start with what it feels like. It's midday. You're visiting the summer palace of a minor noble, just outside the city of Shiraz. Its estate is wrapped in pomegranate orchards, but the real magic is in the house itself. If you duck under an arched entrance, and the temperature drops instantly, it's not just the shade. Something deeper is at work. The ceiling curves high above you in smooth plaster, shaped like an upside-down bowl. The thick earthen walls radiate a strange, gentle cold. A narrow water channel runs through the floor, fed from somewhere underground. A faint breeze moves past your face, though you don't see where it's coming from. You take a breath. It smells like jasmine and stone. It's easy to forget this is the middle of a desert. Now, modern, you might be thinking, sure, but that's just ancient magic. They didn't have to deal with heat waves, right? Oh, but they did. Persia is blistering. Some places hit 50 degrees Celsius in summer. And without compressors, fans, or Netflix to distract them, ancient Persians had to really commit to beating the heat. And they did, with a whole suite of tricks, which we'll walk through slowly tonight. But before we get to the ice houses and secret tunnels, let's pause here. It's just you, sitting cross-legged on a smooth tile bench in a house built entirely by hand. The walls were mixed with mud and straw, the roof designed to redirect heat upward, the windows oriented to miss the sun's worst glare. Nothing here is accidental. Every design choice is an act of rebellion against the sun. And just outside, barefoot children dash through a courtyard, laughing as they leap over the stone irrigation ditches. A servant pours water into a clay amphora, placing it in the shade where it'll cool over time. You wonder if they know how brilliant this all is? Probably not. That's the point. It's everyday life to them, and it's only just beginning. You step back outside for a moment, squinting under the harsh daylight, and catch sight of something towering above the rooftops then. Vertical towers jutting up from certain buildings, like hollow fingers pointing at the sky. They look decorative at first, but there's something calculated about their position. You feel a soft, almost uncanny breeze on your neck, even though the air outside should be as still and heavy as sleep. These aren't towers of vanity, they're badgers, wind catchers, Persia's first and perhaps finest answer to the question, how do you cool a house in the middle of an oven? The wind catcher, or bajir, is not just architecture, it's philosophy, a way of conversing with the elements instead of fighting them. Step beneath one, drawn by that whisper of movement, and the difference is instant. Hot air outside, cool air in. No magic, just physics. The tower has slits open to prevailing winds, which are funneled down through shafts inside the home. The air moves over water sometimes, a small underground pool. Sometimes wet tiles and exits through the opposite side, dragging hot air up and out. It's a cross between a passive fan and a natural refrigerator. Probably wouldn't survive a Persian summer without one. Historians still argue whether the bagir was invented independently in Persia or borrowed from earlier Mesopotamian or Egyptian innovations. But the oldest archaeological evidence of Persian wind catchers comes from the city of Yazd, dating back to the Achaemenid period around 2,500 years ago. These structures weren't just practical, they were beautiful, designed with geometric precision, decorated with ornate tilework, and integrated into the building's overall harmony. Some wind catchers stood nearly 30 meters tall, and some homes had 4. Positioned to catch air no matter which way the wind blew. They're really wealthy. They had multi-directional badgers that rotated or adjusted seasonally. Flex, yes, but a breezy one. As you explore deeper into the city, you start to notice just how common these towers are. From tea houses to bathhouses, from caravanserais to palaces, they rise silently into the sky like watchful guardians of comfort. The sound is the giveaway. It's that soft, steady hush. Not a gust, not a fan's hum, but something more intimate, a whisper of air sliding down an ancient corridor. It wraps around your ears like silk. You duck inside a merchant's house. His midnap sprawled across a low divan. Piled his ceiling above is high and arched. The air cool and dry despite the afternoon sun beating on the clay tiles above. A servant brings you a shallow copper dish of rosewater and crushed mint, another trick of Persian heat beating. Not to drink, but to splash across your face and arms, sending tiny evaporative chills racing across your skin. You smile, your modern brain, baked in the world of thermostats and wall-mounted air conditioners. Might not want to admit it, but this works. It really works. You ask yourself, why haven't we all just built badgers into our homes? The answer, of course, lies in climate. The system works best in dry desert air, in humid places, not so much. But here, where the air is thirsty and the soil baked hard by the sun, the wind catcher is not just viably as masterful, and it didn't stop at homes. Entire mosques and bazaars were designed around wind movement. The air would flow across internal pools, circulate through high domes, and exit through carefully placed vents. No one talked about BTS or airflow rates. They didn't have to. They built with instinct and iteration, and it worked. You glance up again. A child is sitting beneath the wind catcher shaft, lazily spinning a wooden toy. It squeaks softly, the only sound besides that endless, comforting whisper. It's a sound you'll hear in your dreams later. But here's a lesser-known secret. Some badgers could work in reverse. Yes, when the air outside was still and stifling, these towers could function as heat chimneys, pulling the warm indoor air up and out, using nothing but the differential in pressure and temperature. The air outside didn't have to move the heat inside made its own momentum. Historians still argue whether the architects of the time fully understood the thermodynamics at play, or whether it was more of a build, observe, improve method. But either way, they nailed it. And in typical Persian fashion, they didn't stop at function. They added flair. Some wind catchers were lined with ceramic tiles that cooled more efficiently. Others were painted in sacred blues and fiery golds, symbolic representations of water and light. Even utility could be divine here. You make your way to the rooftop of a scholar's house, where several wind catchers rise like chimneys on a ship. The view is stunning, stretching out in tan domes and narrow alleys. But what catches your eye is something else entirely. From tower to tower, thin ropes stretch out, drying linen scented with orange blossom. The fabric flutters faintly in the breeze. You lean against a parapet, the dry air brushing your cheek. A small bird lands on the rim of the wind catcher behind you, chirps once, and disappears into the shade. Below, life continues slowly, sleepily, but with intent. You begin to feel it too. That ancient patience, that quiet mastery of climate through design. No electricity, no compressors, no plastic fans, just wind and wisdom. And that's the thing, these weren't emergency solutions, These were standard, expected. You didn't just hope your house would be cool in summer. You built it to be that way. Later, you'll walk through alleyways carved to funnel air into streets. You'll sip on sour cherry juice, chilled with desert ice. But right now, you just sit beneath the tower and feel the hush of air travel centuries to meet you. You glance again at the structure. Maybe it's not just a wind catcher. Maybe it's a time machine too. You step down from the rooftop and find yourself wandering toward a quieter part of the city, where the houses seem to sink lower into the earth. The heat still presses on your shoulders like a heavy blanket, but here, in these subterranean spaces, it feels lighter, somehow more breathable. These underground homes are not just escapes from the sun, They are the heart of Persian innovation, blending human needs with nature's rhythms. Picture this, you're standing in a courtyard, surrounded by walls so thick they swallow the afternoon heat before it even reaches your skin. The courtyard itself is sunken, like a secret garden carved from the earth. Around you, rooms lead away, many of them partially or fully underground, their ceilings barely above ground level. You slip inside one of these homes, descending a short stairway lined with smooth stone. The air shifts immediately, cool, dry, and still. The temperature drops several degrees, almost like stepping into a natural refrigerator. This, you learn, is the genius of Persian subterranean architecture. They didn't just build houses, sculpted the earth itself to create a refuge from the sun's relentless blaze. But why underground? Why hide beneath the sand? The answer is surprisingly simple and deeply intuitive. Earth is a natural insulator. It takes much longer to heat and cool compared to air. So, when the sun beats down during the day, the thick layer of soil above and around these homes blocks much of that heat from entering living spaces. At night, when desert temperatures plunge dramatically, the earth helps retain warmth, keeping things comfortable inside. The effect is subtle, but powerful and steady. It's natural temperature buffering that modern insulation tries to mimic with varying success. Historians still argue whether these homes originated with necessity or culture, were they a response to climate extremes, or a traditional architectural style passed down through generations. The truth is, both elements likely played a role. You stroll through an underground room, its vaulted ceilings shaped with elegant curves that echo the shapes of wind catchers outside. The walls are thick adobe plaster, damp to the touch in some spots from carefully managed humidity. You feel a faint breeze waft through narrow channels, connecting different parts of the home. It's like the entire house breathes. In fact, these homes often incorporated a system called Qanat cooling and ancient network of underground water tunnels that also supplied the city with water. The cool moisture flowing through these tunnels helped reduce indoor air temperatures and increased humidity, just enough to make the dry desert air more tolerable. The Qanats were marvels of engineering, hand-dug over kilometers to bring water from distant mountain aquifers to arid cities and farms. As water flowed beneath your feet, it carried with it a refreshing coolness that kept entire neighborhoods comfortable. You paused to listen, and faintly, almost imperceptibly, hear the whisper of running water, soothing, quick murmur, blending into the background like a natural white noise machine. This wasn't just functionally, was artful too. Underground homes often featured interior courtyards with shallow pools and plants thriving in the shade. The water's surface shimmered faintly, reflecting sunlight that filtered down through small skylights or open-air wells. Persians understood something modern architects sometimes forget, that nature and comfort are intertwined. You don't have to fight the environment. You can invite it in on its own terms. There is a fringe theory among some scholars suggesting that the Qanat systems did more than cool air. They might have influenced the layout of entire cities. The distribution of water tunnels underground could have dictated where homes and public buildings were placed, creating natural corridors of cooler air. You imagine a city like a living organism, its veins carrying cool water beneath a sun-baked skin. It's a beautiful metaphor, one that almost certainly had a practical basis. But of course, it wasn't perfect. These underground homes could sometimes become damp or musty if ventilation was poor. You imagine the risk of stale air lingering in some hidden corner, or the occasional scuttle of a desert critter seeking refuge. Still, for all their quirks, these subterranean spaces were sanctuaries from the worst of the heat. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some Persian homes, small underground summer rooms were specifically designed to be cooler than the rest of the house, kind of like ancient refrigerators bought for people. These spaces often had marble floors and walls, which helped absorb and radiate coolness and were reserved for the hottest months. Imagine retreating into one of these rooms after the sun has baked the earth all day. You sit cross-legged on a low cushion, the cool marble against your skin soothing away the heat, while a servant fans you gently with palm fronds. This wasn't just luxury, it was a survival strategy. As you leave the underground home and step back into the glaring afternoon light, you notice the narrow alleyways surrounding it. The streets themselves are narrow and winding, often shaded by overhanging balconies and vines. Urban design further limits direct sun exposure, keeping the heat at bay. Its close-knit layout isn't just aesthetic, it's a clever climatic adaptation. Persian cities like Yazd or Kerman, famous for their desert architecture, are living testaments to this approach. Their labyrinthine alleys feel cooler, calmer, even though you know the sun is blazing just a few steps away. You pause by a small fountain in a courtyard. Water trickles softly, the air above it shimmering faintly. You dip a finger in, surprised at the coolness despite the heat around you. The fountain isn't just decoration, it's a microclimate. The evaporation cools the air, creating pockets of respite in the otherwise relentless heat. Historians still argue whether fountains were primarily status symbols or practical cooling devices. Perhaps they were both. After all, nothing says I have enough water like an ornamental fountain spraying precious liquid into the air. But for the common folk, fountains were life givers, tiny oases of coolness amid the desert sprawl. As the afternoon wanes, the shadows lengthen. You find yourself thinking of the many ways Persian architecture doesn't just resist heated dances with it. The buildings aren't fortresses, but partners, balancing warmth and coolness through stone, water, and air. And just like that, you realize that to understand Persian life, you must understand their relationship with the desert, their respect for its harshness, and their joyful rebellion against it. That slow, thoughtful rebellion continues in the very ground beneath your feet. The sound of running water beneath the city is more than a pleasant background. Noise, it is the lifeblood of ancient Persia. As you listen closely, the gentle rush of Qanats threads through the air like a secret melody, connecting distant mountain springs to parched urban centers. Qanats' ingenious underground tunnels are among Persia's greatest hydrological gifts to the world. Imagine digging a sloping tunnel kilometers long, with vertical shafts dug every few dozen meters to remove earth and provide ventilation. This network quietly channels fresh, cool water from aquifers nestled high in the mountains down to the deserts below. Without pumps, without fuel, just the power of gravity. You wander along one of the open-air access shafts. Light filters down from above, touching the cool water that glides silently along the tunnel floor. The air here carries a faint, earthy scent mixed with moisture. It's cool and refreshing, a stark contrast to the searing heat just outside. Historians still argue whether the invention of Qanats originated in Persia or earlier Mesopotamian cultures, but what's indisputable is how transformative they were. By harnessing underground water, these tunnels allowed cities and farms to flourish in environments otherwise too dry to support dense human life. But their contribution to cooling went far beyond irrigation. As the Qanat water runs underground, it absorbs the desert's daytime heat and releases it slowly, moderating the air temperature in nearby homes and public spaces. This natural air conditioning effect was enhanced by architectural features like underground channels and thick walls, which circulated cooled air through living quarters. You imagine how the city's design embraces this? Narrow alleys and shaded courtyards form an intricate web that funnels cool air from Qanat outlets to public squares and residential areas. It's a whole ecosystem of airflow, water, and stone, carefully orchestrated across centuries. But there's an unexpected side to Qanats that few modern visitors consider. Some Qanat shafts served a social role as gathering spots, places where city residents would pause to collect water, share news, or rest in the cool shade. Teas weren't just engineering feats. They were centers of community life. You pictured the scene: women carrying amphoras, children chasing one another along the earthing paths, merchants bartering goods, nearby all with the ever-present murmur of water beneath their feet. And there is a fascinating fringe theory. Some scholars propose that the soothing sound of flowing water from Qanats wasn't just accidental ambience, but a deliberate psychological tactic. The steady murmur might have helped reduce stress and promote calm in a harsh environment, making the heat easier to bear. You find yourself drawn to this idea. After all, humans are wired to find water sounds relaxed even today. Many people use white noise machines mimicking streams and rainfall to sleep better. Persians might have unknowingly tapped into this centuries ago. Still, as much as the Qanat was a symbol of life and refreshment, maintaining it was a monumental task. Skilled workers, called moganas, descended into the tunnels regularly to clear sediment and repair damage. Their work was dangerous, and exacting any collapse could threaten the water supply for entire regions. You think about how such maintenance shaped Persian society. It created jobs, specialized knowledge, and a deep connection to the land's lifelines. Despite its brilliance, the Qanat system wasn't infallible. Droughts and political turmoil sometimes led to neglect. Then, in other cases, invading armies targeted Qanat networks to cripple cities. The delicate balance between water, climate, and civilization was never guaranteed. Still, the fact that some Qanats have functioned for over 2 millennia is a testament to their design. You lean closer to the cool stone rim of an access shaft and dip your fingers in the flowing water. The temperature feels like a kiss of winter in the heart of summer. You close your eyes and breathe in the damp earth, the faint mineral temps of fresh water, the sound of life quietly moving underground. It is both ancient and timeless. A reminder that in Persia, water was more than a resource, it was a guardian of comfort. The sun hangs like molten copper in the sky as you climb a gentle slope leading out of the city. The air wavers in the distance, and even the birds seem to have surrendered to the heat. Yet, your guide, a cheerful old man with a beard as white as salt and eyes full of desert wisdom, insists There's something worth seeing just a little farther. You'll never believe it, he says. Ice. In July. You blink. Maybe the sun has cooked your brain. But no, he means it. And as you crest the hill, it comes into view. A strange, conical structure rising from the ground like the tip of a giant's hat. Its walls are thick mud brick, weathered by wind, but still standing tall. There are no windows. Only one small entrance at the base, half shaded by a makeshift awning. This is a literally ice pit. And yes, this is where ancient Persians stored ice. In the desert, in summer. You step inside, and the temperature plummets like you've entered another world. The air is dense, still, and cool, even though the sun blazes just outside. The thick walls up to 2 meters in some places are made of a special mortar called sarouj, a waterproof, insulating mix of sand, clay, goat hair, ash, and lime. The inner chamber descends into the earth in a deep, bowl-like pit. Down at the bottom, ice, real, actual ice, preserved since the winter. Historians still argue whether the ice was brought from distant mountain peaks or made locally. But most agree that ancient Persians had developed methods to produce ice even in the desert. How? You follow your guide outside again. Just beyond the Yakchal, you notice a long, shallow pool, like a narrow canal built at ground level. This is the trick. In winter, water was poured into these open-air basins at night. The dry desert air and clear skies created perfect conditions for radiative cooling where heat escapes rapidly into the cold night sky. By dawn, a thin layer of ice would form. Workers would collect it, haul it into the Yakchal, and layer it with straw for insulation. Night after night, the ice grew thicker. Pool by pool, block by block. You imagine the patience it required, the discipline. Teach. The entire process was a delicate dance with nature, timed perfectly to the rhythms of the environment. And the result? A desert civilization with access to ice in July. But it wasn't just stored, it was used. In summer, nobles and merchants would order chilled treats bowls of fruit cooled on slabs of ice, drinks served just above freezing, and most impressively, faluda. You close your eyes and picture it. Thin vermicelli noodles made from starch, soaked in a syrup of rosewater and sugar. Then mixed with ice until it turned into a slushy, tangy dessert. The texture is unlike anything you've had, chewy and crunchy, cold and fragrant. Even today, Iranians still enjoy faluda, often with a squeeze of fresh lime juice. And to think, it all began here, with ancient ice pits and nocturnal rituals. Your guide chuckles softly as he slices a chilled melon and offers you a slice. The contrast between the sun on your back and the icy bite on your tongue is heavenly. But here is a lesser-known detail. Some wealthier Persians didn't just store ice. They used it for spectacle. During banquets, servants might carry blocks of glistening ice into courtyards, letting them melt slowly while perfumed fans pushed the cooling air across the guests. It was decadence with a scientific edge, and even in more modest homes, people found ways to cool water and food using the principles of radiative cooling and evaporation. Clay vessels called zir or zirab would keep liquids cool when placed in the shade or buried partway in the ground. Some were even double-layered, using evaporating water between walls to create a mini refrigeration effect. You glance back at the Yakchal, its conical silhouette standing serene against the sky. There's something deeply moving about it. Not just the brilliance of the design, but the idea behind it. That survival in the desert wasn't about brute strength, it was about listening, observing, honoring the landscape, working with it, and perhaps most beautiful of all, this wasn't rare or experimental. It was normal, part of life. Even children knew the taste of summer ice. Even servants learned how to pour water into the night-cooled basins with just the right timing to catch the frost. Knowledge passed from generation to generation, like a secret recipe for snow in a land of fire. You sit on a nearby rock and let the wind catch your robe. The sun is still merciless, but now you understand that it doesn't win. The Persians didn't bow to the heat, they deemed it. You make your way back into the city, the stone paths underfoot still warm from the earlier heat. Around you, life resumes its steady rhythm. Bakers pull flatbread from tandoors, their faces flushed but unbothered. A boy darts past, carrying a basket of figs, the fruit glistening with moisture. You're not sure if it's sweat, dew, or a blessing from the air itself. You're drawn next to a courtyard shaded, tranquil, tiled in dusty blue and cream. There's a central pool, no deeper than a shallow bowl, surrounded by planters of basil, pomegranate trees, and sweet-smelling jasmine. A gentle breeze rolls through, cool and soothing, and the air here feels more like spring than high summer. It's not an accident. This is evaporative cooling in action Persia's most elegant solution to heat control. Here's how it works. When water evaporates, it takes heat with it. It's basic science. But in ancient Persia, they turned this small truth into an entire architectural strategy. Water would be poured into shallow channels or broad stone basins like the one in front of you. As it evaporated, cooled the surrounding air, especially if a wind catcher tower was positioned nearby to funnel that cooled air throughout the home. And they didn't stop at water alone. Step into the shaded archway, and you notice fabrics light, gauzy drapes sagging in the breeze. These were often soaked lightly with rose water or simple, clean water. As air passed through, it cooled and picked up a hint of fragrance. The result, a space that was not only chilled, but smelled like a garden at night. Historians still argue whether these fabric hangings were purely utilitarian or part of a cultural philosophy tied to hospitality and aesthetics. After all, in Persian culture, to invite someone into your home was a sacred act. In comfort, coolness in the heat, fragrance in the dust was a sign of refinement and care. You pause to imagine a midsummer evening here. The sun has dropped below the city walls, and guests began to arrive. They're welcomed with sherbet drinks, cooled with ice, hauled from a yakchal, and they recline on cushions near the pool. The drapes shift gently in the breeze, each flutter releasing a waft of orange blossom or myrtle. Somewhere nearby, a musician plucks a cedar, its soft notes blending with the gurgle of a fountain, and above them, unseen, the house breathes. Wind catchers collect the evening air. Courtyard walls radiate stored coolness from the day before. The pool, the plants, the tiles all work together, passively, to transform heat into something almost romantic. You trail your fingers through the water. It's colder than expected. It's just enough to send a chill up your arm, reminding you that even the smallest acts of design here were layered with intent, one of the quirkiest methods. Terracotta vessels, known as zir jars, were filled with water and left in strategic spots on windowsills, neath arches, or hung from ceilings. Their porous surfaces allowed slow evaporation, cooling the water inside and the air around them. You spot one now, tucked into the corner of a shady alcove, beads of moisture clinging to its red-brown surface. You lift the lid and take a sip. It's not cold in the modern refrigerator sense, but it's brisk, fresh, live. And it wasn't just about cool drinks. Persians also used similar vessels to store dairy, keep herbs fresh, and even preserve certain foods. Some jars had double walls with wet sand between them, enhancing the cooling effect protothermoses with a flair for poetry. In fact, poetry and cooling often met. There's a famous couplet by Sadi of Shiraz, written in the 13th century, where he describes a summer garden as the breath of paradise. He wasn't exaggerating. For Persians, climate comfort was not just about survival. It was about crafting moments of peace, beauty, and even transcendence. You lean back, letting the wind catch your face. The drapes dance again, this time carrying a different sentiment, maybe, or lavender. A woman passes by with a bundle of herbs, trailing cool air behind her. She nods politely. You return the gesture and close your eyes. And while you sit in this shaded sanctuary, you begin to notice how the very architecture around you is designed to slow you down. The paths are narrow and curved. The air is thick with calm. Even the sound of footsteps is softened by layered tiles and sunken walkways. Everything about this place is built to resist rush, to bend the human pace to match the desert's ancient tempo. Here's another fun fact. In some elite homes, especially during the Sasanian period, ceilings were painted with stars, and cool-toned floral patterns were designed not just to please, but to psychologically chill the viewer. Cool colors, cool feelings. Historians still debate whether this was intentional color psychology or simply fashion, but you can't deny the effect. Staring up at a pale blue dome speckled with gold leaf stars while resting in a jasmine-scented courtyard might not lower your body temperature, but it does something soothing to your soul. Later, as twilight settles in, you watch as servants begin to lightly spray water over the tile floors with long-handled brushes. The thin sheen of water instantly begins to cool the surface, making it pleasant to walk barefoot even after a scorching day. Children help. It's a kind of evening ritual, a domestic meditation passed down from mother to daughter, father to son. Not just for comfort, but for pride, because creating this kind of home was a point of honor. And the brilliance is it worked. These passive cooling systems could lower indoor temperatures by 10-15 degrees Celsius or more compared to the outdoor air, enough to sleep, eat, write, and dream even in a climate that broiled most life into submission. You begin to notice another detail, the placement of plants. They're not just scattered randomly. They strategically positioned near water sources and walls where their transpiration, the process by which they release moisture, adds to the cooling effect. And in some homes, the choice of plants had double duty. Basil repelled insects. Jasmine perfumed the air, and myrtle symbolized purity and health. Practical, fragrant, and meaningful all at once. You take one last stroll through the courtyard before moving on. The sky overhead has turned to velvet, pierced with stars. The pool now reflects a perfect mirror of the night, broken only by the occasional breeze. The drapes no longer sway, below slowly like sails on a gentle tide. And as you pass under the final arch, your foot brushes a small clay dish tucked in the walling old incense burner, not just for scent. Certain herbs, when burned, were believed to calm the body and cool the air, even if only symbolically. You smile. Every element here, from the shape of a window to the scent of smoke, is part of a larger system and elegant, ancient choreography that turned hostile heat into something not just bearable, but beautiful. You step out of the shaded courtyard and back into the rhythm of the city. But now, with your senses sharpened, you notice the cooling strategies everywhere. What once seemed like charming decor or accidental elegance now reveals itself as intentional design, layered, nuanced, alive with quiet purpose. Take the rooftops, for instance. As you look upward, you see that many buildings have flat or gently sloped roofs with low parapets and often a covered area at one end. In the soft amber of dusk, families gather here not just for the view, but because rooftops offer one of the coolest spots to sleep on a summer night. Welcome to Persia's version of natural airbed suites, Sarposh. With the heat of the day finally receding, these rooftops become bedrooms. Straw mats are unrolled, pillows fluffed, water jugs brought up, and everyone settles under the stars. Even nobles abandon their indoor luxury for this simple comfort. Why? Because in desert regions, nighttime temperatures can drop significantly, and with no ambient light pollution, the sky becomes a velvet ceiling spangled with constellations. It's not just cooling, it's cosmic. You lie back on the roof now, imagining yourself wrapped in a thin cotton sheet. The breeze whispers stories through the wind catchers, the stone beneath you slowly releasing its stored heat into the night. From nearby rooftops, you hear quiet conversation, the clink of dishes, the faint notes of a flute. Life slows, thoughts soften, breath deepens, hat, and if you lived here, you'd know a few extra tricks to stay cool overnight. Persians often soaked thin cotton sheets in cold water and laid them across the body. These wet sheets dried quickly in the desert air, but while they lasted, they gave a delicious chill. Children would sometimes sleep with clay jugs of cold water next to them, not to drink, but simply to act as a personal cooling device. There are even reports, some confirmed, some more whispered tradition of people placing terracotta bowls filled with ice or cold water at their feet while they slept, creating tiny zones of evaporative bliss. Historians still debate whether these habits were passed down orally, or if they were codified in domestic manuals now lost to time. But oral traditions were strong here, and many households had generations of experience woven into their bedtime routines. The rooftops themselves were part of the cooling strategy, too. Homes were often built in a way that allowed for cross-ventilation from the rooftop entrance to internal courtyards. Air could flow smoothly and steadily, particularly in the evening hours. And because the homes were so closely packed in old Persian cities, their collective shade during the day helped regulate rooftop temperatures at night. There's something quietly profound about this, how domestic life adapted not just around the climate, but with it. The rhythms of daily life, the meals, the naps, the conversations shifted in sync with the sun, the wind, and the breath of the earth. As the stars overhead sharpen into focus, you can almost hear the past. Generations of families lying under the sky, just like this, grandmothers telling old stories, lovers whispering under cover of darkness, children drifting to sleep under the slow-moving constellations that have always watched over Persia. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some cities had rooftop codes unwritten, but well understood. Families would not build extra floors unless absolutely necessary, so they wouldn't block airflow or sunlight for their neighbors. It was a kind of community-based architectural etiquette, centuries ahead of modern zoning. You sit up and look around. The rooftops stretch like honeycomb across the city. It's not chaos, it's choreography. A balance between privacy and openness, shadow and starlight, earth and air. And in more elite homes, rooftop use wasn't limited to sleeping. Some had shaded pavilions, called talars, open on three sides and supported by slender columns. These were day lounges in the hotter months where scholars read. Merchants negotiated, and poets composed odes while sipping sherbet and watching the city move beneath them. You walk toward a rooftop talar now. Its pillars are simple but elegant, carved with swirling patterns and capped with bright turquoise tiles. A breeze stirs the curtain, and you step inside. The stone beneath your feet is cool, the seating area cushioned and low. From here, you can see the wind catchers rising in the distance like sentinels, the yakcho domes, half hidden behind garden walls. And further still, the dusty glow of the mountains. This height isn't just practical, it's spiritual. Elevated spaces like this were thought to bring one closer to the heavens, both metaphorically and physically. In some texts, the rooftop is where one contemplates divine things, where the air is clearest and the mind is calmest. Historians still argue whether these rooftop towers had ritual significance or were simply conveniences of climate, but the distinction hardly matters. It's when design, spirituality, and climate comfort blend so seamlessly. You don't separate them, you live them. You sit quietly, your hands resting on cool tile. The wind is gentle now, and your eyelids are heavy. Somewhere below, someone pours water into a bowl, and the sound carries soft, round, eternal. A dog barks in the distance. A prayer call echoes briefly, then fades, and above, the stars keep watching. You realize that nothing about this world fights nature. Everything bends with it, listens to it, and in doing so, outsmarts it. These breezes, these rituals, they are not afterthoughts. They are the result of centuries of learning how to be at peace with the heat. You lie down again. The wind slides over your chest. A faint floral scent wafts up from a courtyard garden below. Okay, And the desert, though still warm, feels suddenly kind. Sleep is easy here, okay? And you begin to understand why. By the time morning peeks over the city walls, you're already stirring under the soft light of dawn. The breeze is still cool, but the promise of heat is tucked into the golden edges of the rising sun. Down below, the city is beginning to wake. Somewhere, bread is being baked, water is drawn, cloth is shaken out and hung on lines like sleepy flags. And you're already descending from the rooftop with the rest of the family, your body slightly stiff from stone, but your mind rested from starlight and wind. But where does one go in the middle of a hot morning when the sun climbs higher and the city begins to simmer? You follow the scent of jasmine and the splash of water and find yourself entering one of the most essential spaces in ancient Persian life, the hammam, or public bathhouse. Now, you might be thinking, a bath? In the heat? Really? Yes, really, because Persians didn't just bathe to get clean. They bathed to cool down, to relax, to socialize, and perhaps most surprisingly, to sweat their way to comfort. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But here's the logic. A traditional Persian bathhouse used a carefully designed sequence of rooms, starting from warm, then hot, and finally cool. You'd begin in the sarbine, a domed hall with fountains and benches, lit by shafts of light from tiny glass-studded holes in the ceiling. You'd sit, chat, maybe sip on something gently spiced cinnamon tea or mint water while your body adjusted. Then you'd move to the hot room, or garmkhani, heated by an underground furnace called a korsi. The steam was moist and dense, and it opened the pores. It'd sweat, cleanse, sometimes even nap. And finally, you'd return to the cooler rooms, gradually adjusting back to ambient air, allowing your body to experience a kind of reset. The contrast between the heat of the garmkhani and the cooling open air afterward was not just refreshing, but it was invigorating. The effect was similar to how we feel stepping out of a sauna into snow. Only here, it was desert air that suddenly felt fresh and sweet. Historians still argue whether bathhouses served primarily hygienic or social roles, but in truth, they were both. A place to clean, gossip, plan, flirt, recover, and yes, beat the heat. And because these bathhouses were semi-underground, often built with thick walls, domed ceilings, and natural stone, they retained coolness even in high summer. Their water came from the same Qanats systems that sustained the city. It was plentiful, cool, and flowed constantly. Okay, you sit now in the sarbine, admiring the star-shaped tiles beneath your feet. Around you, the occasional clink of copper bowls being filled, the hum of a quiet conversation. The air smells of soap root, eucalyptus, and clay. Okay, and there is a fringe theory you love, that Persians intentionally scheduled bath visits during peak heat hours, not to escape the sun, but to reset their body's internal thermostats. It's like hitting reboot on a sluggish summer brain. Another detail, between rounds in the hot and cold rooms, bathers were often rubbed down with coarse cloths or loofahs and massaged with oils, sometimes scented with rose or bitter orange. Not only did this leave you soft as a plum, it also stimulated circulation, which helped regulate heat. You exit the hammam, a new person's skin tingling, hair damp, clothes clinging to cool skin. The outside air no longer feels oppressive. It feels manageable, inviting, even. And what's next? Why, a shady spot and a sweet drink, of course. In almost every Persian city, near the bathhouses, you'll find small tea houses, chakanets, nestled into shaded alcoves. Their interiors, dark and cool, their floors lined with thick rugs. You duck into one now, escaping the first bite of the morning sun. Inside, a samovar hisses gently. The tea master, old as time, nods without looking up. You don't need to order. You sit. A tray appears. A glass of steaming tea, dark as molasses, scented with cardamom. Beside it, a small bowl of chilled white mulberries, sticky with the nectar, and, if you're lucky, maybe a treat of kashira drink made from mountain sorrel seeds, steeped in rose water and ice. A classic Persian cooler. The seeds settle like glitter at the bottom of the glass. You swirl, sip, exhale. It's no accident that so many traditional Persian drinks are cooling by design. Sharbati Bahar, Narinj, Golab, and Sakanja Beam were all summer favorites, each with its own subtle way of helping the body cope with the heat. Some of these recipes are based in ancient humoral theory, a Persian medical philosophy that categorized foods by their warming or cooling effects. Vinegar, for instance, was considered cooling, and so were cucumbers, melons, and basil. Historians still debate how much of this theory was accurate science and how much was intuitive observation. But the effect was real enough, and it worked. You lean back now, letting the quiet hum of the tea house settle into your bones. Someone tunes a santur in the Bacca dulcimer with dozens of delicate strings. The soft, metallic notes rise and fall like water droplets on stone. Outside, the sun is getting serious. But inside, you're already several steps ahead of it. A nap is calling, maybe in a quiet room with thick curtains, or under a trellis where grapevines dapple the sunlight into tiny spots of gold. You imagine the gentle touch of a breeze against your cheek, a cicada's lazy trill, the slow, looping thought. This is how you survive the desert, not with force, but with rhythm. And before you even realize it, your eyes close, not because you're tired, exactly, but because the coolness has become a lullaby. Afternoon presses in slowly, like warm honey trickling across a flat stone. The streets quiet again, as they always do in high heat. Shops close their shutters. Donkeys retreat into shaded stables. Even the wind grows still, as if reluctant to move through the heavy air. But you've adapted now. You know the rhythms. You move like the Persians did, not rushing to beat the heat, but gliding around it. You wander into a residential quarter, tucked into the older part of the city. The alleys are narrower here, like woven threads in a tapestry, and the walls of the homes lean inward ever so slightly, creating pockets of deep shade. These twisting lanes aren't the result of poor planning. They're intentional masterclass in passive urban cooling. How? Let's unravel the design. First, narrow streets limit the amount of direct sunlight that reaches ground level, especially in the early and late hours, when the sun's at its highest. The closely built structures cast overlapping shadows that form shaded corridors of relative comfort. It's noticeably cooler here several degrees. In fact, you notice it in your skin, in your breathing, even in the stillness of sound. There is a hush, a softness. Second, the direction of the streets matters. Cities like Yazd and Kerman were often aligned with prevailing wind patterns. The alleys twist and turn, yes, but many funnel breezes between structures, guiding airflow like invisible rivers. These are called Kiabenhala Sard, cool alleys. You feel the air slip past your cheeks now, crisp as a linen sheet pulled from the shade. And then there's the material of the walls. Adobe or mud brick, capable of absorbing the sun's heat during the day and releasing it long after sundown. Their color light tan, ochre, soft peach reflects rather than absorb sunlight, reducing thermal buildup. You press your palm against one and feel it warm, not hot, radiating gently like a sun-warmed loaf of bread. But perhaps the most surprising element of these urban cool zones, the overhangs. In certain neighborhoods, upper floors jut out over the street below, forming semi-covered passages known as sebat. These shaded tunnels aren't just for aesthetics or space their nature's own ceiling fans. They shield the lanes beneath from direct sun, trap cool air, and reduce evaporation of street-level moisture. In some cases, a water channel would run quietly through the Sabat center, amplifying the cooling effect. Historians still argue where the Sabats evolve from purely defensive design blocking invaders' visibility. If climate came first, likely both. After all, in ancient Persia, form always followed function. And sometimes, function followed poetry. A quirky detail. Some homes on opposite sides of an alley were connected by small walkways above lying residents to visit neighbors or family without stepping into the sun. These were called parviskas, and though rare today, they once stitched the urban fabric like quiet bridges of coolness and kinship. You pass under one now. The passage is dim and cool, its ceiling painted faintly with stylized birds and pomegranates. A lazy cat dozes on the stone step, belly up to the breeze. You step over her gently, careful not to disturb the one creature who's truly mastered desert life. Side the houses, the same logic continues. You peek into an open doorway, and the scent of lime and herbs draws you in. The Andaruni or women's quarters lies behind a long hallway. The Baruni, or public reception area, sits nearer the entrance. This separation isn't just cultural, it's practical. By having the guest area closer to the street, the inner rooms remain more insulated from noise, dust, and heat. The heart of the home is its courtyard, a central oasis. Always. You enter one now, a square or rectangle with a pool at the center, hoot trees around the edge, and rooms branching out on every side. It's symmetrical, serene designed, not just to impress, but to breathe. Courtyards act as lungs, letting hot air rise and escape while cooler air settles in the shaded recesses below. You sit beside the pool. The water is still, interrupted only by the occasional ripple from a falling leaf. You dip your fingers in, still cool, still magic, and the windows here, high, small, and covered in intricate wooden lattice called mashrabia. These weren't just decorative though. Their patterns are exquisite. They controlled sunlight, filtered air, and protected privacy. Some homes had colored glass windows, too. When sunlight passed through in the late afternoon, it scattered rainbows across the floor like silent confetti. A cooling effect for the spirit, if not the body. Another trick. The ceilings are high, often domed or vaulted too, encourage hot air to rise above the occupied space. And in some rooms, tiny vents near the ceiling let the warm air escape, drawn out by convection as cooler air is pulled in below. A dance of temperature and pressure performed silently all day long. There's even a name for these purposefully ventilated rooms. Tabi, designed as the designated summer spaces within homes. You walk into one now? It's modesta, few cushions, a woven mat, and a low tray for tea, but the temperature is noticeably cooler. The breeze from the adjacent courtyard flows in like a whisper, and the smell of basil and wet earth rides on it. In richer homes, there might also be a house khana special room with a small indoor pool and elaborate tile work where elite families would retreat during the hottest days. Think of it as an ancient spa, cooled by Qanat-fed fountains and stone floors. You can almost hear the trickling water now. Even daily schedules adapted to this architectural rhythm. The early morning hours were for labor picking, cleaning, shopping, trade. As the sun climbed, the city slipped into a hush. Meals were light, movements slow, naps common. Afternoons were reserved for study, reflection, or quiet indoor crafts like weaving or calligraphy. Persians had a word for this heat-induced stillness, tafri. It means rest, but also joy. The act of relaxing, not out of laziness, but out of harmony with the sun. You feel it now in your bones, that ancient justification for doing less. A fringe theory suggests that even the poetic language of Persia, the metaphors of burning hearts, cool eyes, fiery glances, were influenced by this climate awareness. The words themselves bent around the heat, just as the buildings did, and just as you now do without realizing it. You lean back against the courtyard wall, your eyes closing for a moment. The sun is high again, but it doesn't matter. You're in the right place, in the right shape, in the right time. The heat is here, but it cannot touch you. By late afternoon, the world begins to stir again. The sun, though still bright, has passed its cruelest hour. A hush gives way to a hum. Merchants begin to reopen their shops. Stores creak on old hinges, and the smell of fresh bread returns to the air like a familiar song. You walk along the market road now, bazaars that stretch like arteries through the city. These aren't just commercial centers, they're thermal miracles. You're entering one of the oldest and coolest urban solutions ever devised. Step inside, and you're met with a different world. The first thing you notice is the dim light. The vaulted ceilings are high, and the space is lit mostly by small skylights called panjari, Rashanith. That light stream in like strands of gold, but never the full, punishing sun. And the moment you leave the outside glare, your body relaxes. You exhale. You didn't realize how tense you were. The air inside is still, but not stagnant. There's a rhythm to its movement, controlled by design. High ceilings create vertical airflow, while carefully placed vents allow warm air to escape, drawing cooler currents inward. Some of the oldest bazaars were even built partially underground. Using the earth's natural insulation to stabilize temperature, you pass stalls of dried fruit, silks, handmade slippers. A man fans himself lazily with a palm frond paddle. He nods to you. His stall is shaded by a deep overhang, and just behind him, a clay jar of water sits sweating gently. The water inside is cool. Of course it is. Listen, there's the sound of trickling water again. You follow it down a side corridor and find yourself at a Sabza Madana, small indoor garden space built right into the market. There's a fountain at the center, surrounded by herbs growing in clay pots. Mint, basil, tarragon, and wild cucumber vines. These aren't for show. They refresh the air, feed the body, and charm the senses all at once. Historians still argue whether these gardens were originally part of market design or added over time, but today they're indispensable. It's a leafy refuge amid stone and commerce, and the people, they move slowly. No one's rushing. Shoppers lean in to inspect peaches. Merchants sip tea. Children nap in the corners under mother's shawls. Stairs, something you hadn't noticed before. The bazaar's floor is slightly sloped, almost imperceptibly, but enough to allow water to flow. In the mornings, shopkeepers pour water over the stones to cool the ground and reduce dust. It evaporates slowly throughout the day, keeping temperatures down. The floor beneath your sandals feels slightly damp, slightly cooler than outside. Subtle genius. You pause at a spice seller stall. The colors are dizzying saffron like sunpowder, sumac like crimson ash, black limes shriveled into fists of flavor. He lifts a small bowl toward you. Dried rose petals mixed with crushed basil. For headaches, he says, or when the heat makes you irritable. You breathe in deeply, okay? The scent is both sharp and sweet, almost medicinal, but it's more than just folk remedy, okay? These herbs were part of Persia's ancient Unani medicine tradition, which tied health to balancing cooling herbs to emotional and physical calm. And the truth is, you do feel calmer here. The hum of voices, the scent of rose water and cumin, the texture of wool and tile and stone beneath your fingertips, all of it conspires to quiet the nervous system. This isn't shopping. This is shelter, a quirky tidbit. Some bazaars had built-in cool zones, specifically designed for long stays. Merchants work in the same spot day after day, learned where the shade shifted by the hour and adjusted their wares accordingly. There's even a saying, the bestseller knows the wind before the buyer knows the price. You smile at that one? Further ahead, in one of the larger domed halls, a water seller moves between the stalls. His mashka goatskin bag slung across one shoulder. He calls out softly, and you recognize the tune, a rhythmic chant passed down through generations, meant to soothe and signal refreshment. You take a sip from his ladle. The water is shockingly cold, tinted with mint and the faintest trace of vinegar. Second Jabin, you nod in thanks, and he smiles, moving on. This is another layer of Persian cooling philosophy. Don't just build for comfort, live for it. Move slowly, hydrate often, dress in light, breathable fabrics, and stay in shade whenever possible. Even clothing had a purpose: white, fitting linen or cotton tunics that trapped cool air close to the body while reflecting sunlight. Every detail calibrated. You think back to your own clothes, how the fabric breathes, how even your shoes, simple leather sandals, let you feel the stone beneath you. Somehow, the contact with the earth itself seems to matter here. The cool of tile, the feel of water, the rhythm of footsteps. You reach the far end of the bazaar, where the domes grow higher and the crowd thins. It opens into a large public square, flanked by shade trees, mostly plane trees and acacias. This space, like many in Persian cities, is more than aesthetic. It acts as a thermal transition zone, a place to rest, rehydrate, or wait until the streets grow cooler again. And in the center of it all, another pool. Not deep, not grand, it's wide and round, with a few lilies floating on its surface. You sit on the edge, trailing your hand through the water. It's warm, but not hot, like the desert itself has finally agreed to slow down. A fringe theory among some architectural historians suggests that these public spaces weren't just about cooling things, were about resilience. A way for communities to come together and recover from the stresses of climate and city life. You don't know if that's true, but you believe it anyway. You lie back against a low wall, eyes closed, listening. Somewhere, a copper bell rings. A bird calls twice. A child laughs. The heat is still there, but no longer pressing, just pulsing gently in the background, like the bass line of a song you've learned how to hum along with. And that S when it hits you. The genius of Persia's cooling systems was in fighting the heat, was in welcoming it, in learning to dance with it, and making it a partner instead of an enemy. Shade becomes sacred. Stillness becomes a skill. And survival, it becomes something beautiful. Evening returns slowly, the sun softening to a bruised apricot as it dips behind the distant Zagros mountains. The air, heavy and slow all day, begins to lighten. You feel it first in your fingertips, the sudden sense that movement is possible again. That breath comes easier, that even the heat has grown tired and wants to rest. You follow the scent of grilling lamb and baked flatbread toward a residential neighborhood. This is when the real social hours begin. In Persia, the day doesn't end with the sunset. It begins, again rearranged, cooler and calmer. You hear a rhythmic tapping ahead, wood on stone. Rounding a corner, you find an elderly man gently sweeping the walkway in front of his home. Not dusting, but watering. He pours a little water from a copper jug across the threshold and brushes it evenly with a reed broom. It's a simple ritual, repeated every evening. Wet the ground, cool the air, settle the dust. He sees you and smiles. No words needed. The gesture is enough. You're invited into the Memon Qanats guest room. Every Persian home, no matter how modest, has one. It's a place of honor and hospitality, designed to impress, to refresh, and, above all, to comfort. The door opens to a high-ceilinged room lined with cushions, the floor covered in layered rugs. A samovar steams gently in the corner, and above it all hangs a worry fan made, not of metal, but of palm fibers, pulled by a slow-moving crank. Even in private spaces, the focus on cooling never stops. You're offered a glass of Tokuma Sharbati basil seed, drinks served ice cold. The seeds swell into jelly pearls, floating like tiny moons in sweetened water. It's oddly satisfying, like drinking a snow globe. The drink cools the body from the inside out, and is not just delicious, it's functional. Basil is a known cooling herb in Persian medicine, believed to balance heat-related excesses in the body. Across from you, the host's daughter carries a bowl of water and a cloth. She soaks the fabric and drapes it across the tile floor beneath a small, open window. As air moves through, it picks up moisture and becomes noticeably cooler. The room is transformed within minutes, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. Everything softens. You lean into a cushion, eyes half-lidded, and listen to your hosts begin their evening storytelling. This, too, is part of the cooling tradition, socializing slowly. You don't rush a summer evening in Persia. You extend it like honey on a warm plate. Jokes are shared. Family gossip is traded like rare spices. Someone quotes half-ass, someone else refills the basil drink. The fan turns with a tired groan. There's a certain type of room called a shabstan, usually in the basement or partially below ground level. It's where entire families retreat during the hottest nights. You're invited to see theirs. Stairs spiral downward, and immediately the air changes. It's cooler, thicker, darker. These rooms are constructed with thick stone, minimal windows, and sometimes their own small Qanat-fed channels running underneath or along the walls. The water's constant trickle provides a subtle thermal chilling, a soothing soundtrack. You enter the room, lit only by oil lamps. The air smells of earth and old stone. You can hear your own breath. There's a mattress laid out on the floor, and clay jars of water resting in each corner, perspiring into the air. A family would gather here to sleep on the worst nights, the walls acting as a shield against the desert's wrath. Curious feature you notice, the walls are curved, not sharp right angles. Gentle, soft shapes. This was intentional, reducing corners for better air circulation and also reducing dust collection. Even the shape of space in Persia was tailored to climate. Historians still debate whether shabastans were originally designed for women's seclusion or purely for thermal refuge. Over time, they became both, spaces of quiet retreat, contemplation, and bodily relief. As you rest on a cool mat, one of the elders tells you of the wind catcher you saw earlier that day. They are called badgers, and their performance is still something of a marvel. Some designs include damp cloth or trays of water at their base, so that incoming air not only flows, but cools further via evaporation. Others feature multiple shafts to direct air according to wind direction, a feat of ancient engineering that rivals modern HVAC systems in efficiency. You remember standing beneath one earlier, the way the wind had found your skin despite the blazing heat outside. Time. You didn't know it then, but that moment was centuries in the making, crafted by generations of builders, thinkers, and those who'd learned how to survive the sun, not by fearing it, but by shaping their world around it. A light joke is shared. Laughter rises in the dim room. Someone plays a simple string instrument, and a few words of poetry are recited, lines about gardens in the heart, about stars as lanterns for God. And here, in this quiet, underground haven, something ancient stirs. A philosophy made of mud brick and moonlight. A conviction that even the fiercest heat can be met with grace, patience, and clever design. You find yourself tracing the tile patterns on the floor with your fingertips, feeling the tiny ridges and imperfections. You're not just cooling your skin, you're touching history, And above you, though you can't see it, the stars return to their nightly vigil, There's one last cooling trick they share with you, perhaps the most charming of all. In some wealthier homes, particularly in Yazd and Shiraz, the family would keep bowls of scented water near open windows. Rose water, orange blossom, sometimes even vinegar and honey. The breeze that passed over the liquid would carry not only coolness, but aroma. Entire homes would fill with fragrance. These weren't just perfumed rooms, they were emotional sanctuaries, calming, cleansing. A fringe belief held that certain scents could balance the soul as temperature, just the body as. That rose cooled anger, that sandalwoods soothed sorrow, that mint restored joy. You don't need science to prove it. You breathe it in now, and you believe. The conversation slows, the lamplight dims, the fan's rhythm grows steadier, as if matching your heartbeat. And in this moment, then this softly lit shabstan, among tile and laughter and evaporated rosewater, you begin to understand that the best defense against heat was never technology. It was community, design, ritual, beauty. It was knowing that air could be invited, not forced, that water could be whispered into motion, that shade could be designed like sculpture, that even fire has a soft edge if you treat it like an old friend. And so you lie back, eyes fluttering, the quiet hum of Persian summer sailing over you like a second skin. You are not escaping the heat. You are dreaming with it. You wake again, but this time not from sleep, just from stillness. It's a kind of slow, drifting pause that ancient Persian life invited in summer evenings. Outside, the city is dark, except for flickers of oil lamps and the occasional glow of a brazier. The heat has not entirely left, but it's different now. It's no longer oppressive, just part of the night's breath. You stretch your limbs, grateful for the thick walls and low ceilings of the shabstan. The air still carries a hint of rosewater from the bowl left by the window. Somewhere above, you hear the creak of a wind catcher shifting ever so slightly with the breeze. Tonight, your hosts are taking you to the garden. It's not just any garden, of course. This is the Persian paradise of Baga concept, so central to Persian identity that the word paradise in English is derived from the old Persian paradisa, meaning a walled enclosure. You make your way through quiet streets, the walls lit by the occasional torch bracket, until you reach the garden gate. Swings open with a sleepy groan, and you step inside. At first, it's too dark to see anything, but then your eyes adjust and the outlines take form. Geometric walkways, trimmed hedges, tall cypress trees, casting deep shadows. And in the very heart a long, shallow pool reflecting the night sky. The design is no accident. These gardens are laid out according to quadrilateral symmetry, often with 4 channels of water meeting in the Centera layout called Chahar Bagh, or 4 gardens. It symbolizes the 4 rivers of paradise in Islamic tradition: water, milk, honey, and wine. But even before Islam, this layout represented balance, surf, wind, fire, water, body, mind, spirit, breath. And here's the quiet genius. These gardens weren't just for beauty or symbolism. They were thermal refuges. You sit beside the pool, dipping your fingers into the water. It's cool, fed by underground Qanats and shaded all day by the surrounding trees. The temperature here is lower than in the city, perhaps by only a few degrees, but it's enough to feel like grace. The trees, too, are chosen wisely. Cypress for vertical shade, plane trees for broad leaves, pomegranate for fruit and fragrance, orange trees for their bitter blossoms, each species contributing its own kind of coolness. And the sound, oh, the sound. The water trickles gently from small spouts into the main channel. Grace, it creates a white noise that lulls the nerves and camouflages distant chatter. The breeze rustles the trees with a sound like silk being folded. Every element was chosen to quiet the soul. It's not just a place to visit, but to restore. You walk the path now, the flagstones still holding a whisper of the day's warmth. Along the edge of the walkway, you notice small clay jars, unassuming, plain. Inside, cool water. Guests are invited to drink whenever they wish, but not in haste. This isn't a place for gulping. This is a place for sipping, for sighing, for watching shadows stretch slowly across a lawn that's never hurried. A quirky practice. Some gardens had underground sleeping chambers, attached small domed rooms, cooled by air tunnels and surrounded by vegetation. Called sardub, they were summer sanctuaries for poets, philosophers, or simply overheated children. It's said that the great poet Sadi once wrote an entire chapter of Gulistan from inside a sardub lined with mosaic tiles and rose-scented basins. Historians still debate whether these rooms were common in private homes or limited to palatial estates. But one thing is clear. The Persian garden wasn't ornamental. It was essential. Even the night air here is different. It's not just cooler, but sweeter. That's no accident either. Along the walkways, small channels of water run parallel to the stone. As night falls and the temperature drops, the water begins to evaporate. The surrounding heat is absorbed by the evaporation process, cooling the ambient air. You notice this as you pass by, your foot brushing over the open watercourse, the faint kiss of chill on your ankle. In some gardens, domed pavilions mark the corners. It's night, you're invited into one. The dome above is intricately painted, birds, vines, and curling calligraphy. The walls are pierced with small vents, and the floor is tiled with deep blue and sea glass green, designed to remind you of water, even in dryness. You sit. A tray is brought tea, of course, but also sliced melons served on cold stone plates. Not refrigerated, stored smartly in the depths of the house where heat never quite reaches. The melon's surface beads with condensation, and when you bite into it, it's like rain inside your mouth. And here's something else. Persian evenings didn't end when people grew tired. They ended when the air finally cooled. Sleep and breeze were intertwined. You recline on a soft cushion, gazing at the stars through the open arches. One of your hosts recites lines from Ferdowsi, something about mountains and moonlight. You don't catch every word, but you catch the rhythm, the pace, the peace. Even the breeze, which has returned, seems to know it's time to slow down. One of the elders tells a tale of a prince who built a garden so cool that the sun never dared scorch it. It's clearly an exaggeration, but you smile anyway, because for the first time, you understand the intent. The goal was never to defeat nature. It was to live so closely with it that comfort became a natural state, not bought, not forced, designed. You rise once more and walk toward the water. The reflection is perfect. Trees above, stars above, you in between. The garden isn't just a place anymore. It's a lesson, a philosophy. Coolness can be cultivated through patience, through art, through the soft engineering of peace. You reach down, trail your fingers once more through the water, and suddenly you feel something you haven't felt all day. You're cold. You smile, and then you laugh, quietly, just once. It feels like a miracle. It's deep night now, and the stars are holding their posts in the ink-black sky like quiet sentinels. You've stepped out of the garden and begun the slow walk back toward the rooftops of the city. It's not because there's a need to rush, but because you're craving the height, the breeze, and the soft familiarity of stone under your back. You climb a narrow stairwell between two houses, the walls still faintly warm, and reach the top. From here, Yazdor, Isfahan, or wherever your mind has wandered, tonight unfolds like a quilt of soft shapes and darker voids. Every dome and tower gently outlined by moonlight. This rooftop is no accident either. Ancient Persian homes were built with flat roofs, not just for structural simplicity, but for function. The roof was a natural retreat's leaping platform, storage space, and social hub, all rolled into one. And most importantly, in summer, it was the coolest spot in the house once the sun had finally gone to bed. You lie down on a woven mat, its fibers still bearing the memory of the day's heat, but no longer clinging to it. Around you, families are beginning to ascend. You see the silhouettes of others laying out bedding, adjusting pillows, unfolding light shawls to guard against the desert night chill. There's a communal rhythm to it. The rooftop becomes a neighborhood in the stars, and as you lie back, something subtle happens. The world inverts. The sky becomes the floor. The earth far below seems the ceiling, distant and irrelevant. There's a reason the ancients made astrology a science here. When you sleep under the sky every night, the stars don't feel symbolic. They feel close, intimate, familiar. The breeze returns, stronger now. Your host has brought up a clay Sierra large wide water jar, its sides still moist. The evaporation from the jar's porous surface chills the water inside and the air around it. He places it nearby, and though it makes no sound, you feel its presence, a pocket of invisible coldness, slowly drifting your way. A quirky tradition, once popular in parts of Persia, placing a slab of marble or stone beneath the bedding, soaked earlier in water and cooled in the courtyard shade. The sleeper would lie atop it with a thin cloth between body and stone. Primitive air conditioning, perhaps effective. Absolutely. You can almost imagine it beneath you eats, smooth, whisper-cold surface, anchoring your warmth like a sleeping stone raft. Your host chuckles and points at the sky, reciting an old folk phrase. Daunty waste dreams inside four walls when there's a whole heaven waiting. You're not entirely sure whether it's meant as poetry or practical advice, but you nod. Around you, the sounds of the rooftop world unfold. Someone coughs gently in the distance. A goat shuffles in a pen below. Kettle whistles one last time before being forgotten. Kettle giggles at something whispered, then falls quiet. You turn onto your side and notice how perfectly the roof tiles have been laid. No dips, no stray heat retained. The edges are rounded, no sharp corners to catch the breeze and break it. Even here, in the most open of spaces, the design is deliberate. Some homes, you recall, had small, raised parapets to shield the sleeper from the occasional gust or from rolling off the edge. Others had nothing, just a mat and a sky. Trust was part of the architecture. Historians still argue whether rooftop sleeping was primarily driven by necessity or culture. Was it a response to heat or a philosophical embrace of night itself? But here's the truth. Up here, lying between heaven and earth, you understand that it's both. Persians didn't just avoid the sun, they chose the stars. And in choosing them, they created a space where sleep felt sacred, not just unconsciousness, but rest, a reward, a kind of praise to the body for surviving the day's fire. You close your eyes, and the breeze finds your cheeks again. Your breathing slows, not because you force it, but because your body recognizes something ancient, memory it never knew it had. Above, the sky continues its slow, silent swirl. Constellations drift like old caravans. Perhaps you imagine them tracing the outlines of gardens, or Qanats, or towers of wind. Acacia itself, written in stars. The air cools further, and someone places a light shawl over your shoulders. You didn't even notice the chill setting in. But they did. That's how rooftop life works. Everyone watches out for each other. No words, just movement. And now, you are part of it. The rhythm of a civilization designed not just to endure the desert, but to transform it, to weave coolness from brick and breeze, to make stillness not boring, but beautiful. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, its walls will warm. The city will breathe its slow, sighing breath of survival once more. But tonight, the wind belongs to you. And for now, for this perfect sliver of time between yesterday and heat, you sleep not despite the desert, but with it. You wake to the gentle hush of early morning, not quite dawn, but the sky has begun its slow transformation from velvet black to dusty lavender. Around you, the rooftops are dotted with the rising forms of others also waking. Nobody speaks. The silence is not empty, it's sacred, filled with the soft movements of a city carefully returning to life. You sit up slowly, and the air is still cool. For this brief window of time, the world is at its most generous. The heat has not yet reclaimed its throne, and the wind that roams the alleys still carries traces of the stars. Your host offers you a shallow bowl of sure cold milk infused with dates and a touch of cardamom. It's gently sweet, calming to the stomach and soothing to the soul. The milk, cooled overnight in an earthen jar, has that faintly smoky, earthy flavor that no modern refrigerator can replicate. You sip it slowly, watching the city blink awake. Below, in the streets, a quiet ritual unfolds. Shopkeepers sprinkle water at their thresholds. Children carry loaves of fresh bread from neighborhood bakeries, still hot from the tender ovens. And from distant minarets, the first call to prayer begins to rise. Sound not loud, but deeply resonant, like a ripple through stone. It's time to descend. But you don't return the way you came. Your host leads you down the opposite side of the house, into a part you haven't yet seen, a passageway that curves gently into darkness. The walls narrow slightly, and the air grows cooler with each step. You're entering the oldest part of the home, a place where knowledge lives. This is the sort of literally cold place. A semi-subterranean room used for food storage, but also sometimes for meditation, writing, or simply surviving the worst of the heat. You step inside. The ceiling is vaulted. The walls are tiled in blues and soft greens. There's a low bench running along the wall, covered in cushions, and a water basin sunk into the center of the room. Above it, a small opening just to slit lets in light filtered through a decorative screen. The effect is not dramatic. It's subtle, gentle, like the room is always at twilight, regardless of hour. Here, everything slows down again. A key. Run your fingers over the surface of the basin. The water is cold. It's not room temperature. Cold. And you know now how it got that way. From deep underground, a Qanat feeds the basin, its path carefully measured so that gravity and geology do all the work. The stone around the basin is slightly damp. It's not wet, just enough to carry a whisper of cool into the air around it. You breathe deeply. This isn't just architecture. This is atmosphere. You don't know if that's true. Sitting here, you understand why someone would believe it. As you rest, a younger member of the family brings in a wooden tray with herbs spread out to dry thyme, wild chamomile, dried lime, and a green powder you don't recognize. She places them on a wide ceramic plate by the light slit and lets them sit in silence. Later, they'll be crushed, mixed into cooling tonics, or added to yogurts and teas meant to calm heat from the inside out. And that's the hidden secret of Persian cooling. It isn't just outside you, it's internal. A philosophy of balance between wind and stillness, fire and water, noise and silence, sun and stone. Cooling isn't a device, it's a worldview. You listen to the water's echo from deep below. You feel the temperature of stone. You smell dust and mint and earth. And in that perfect intersection of senses, you realize this is how people once lived, not in spite of nature, but with it. And even more than that, they celebrated it. In the surfaces they touched, in the homes they shaped, in the rituals they repeated for thousands of years. A breeze finally finds its way through the slit above, swirling the herb leaves. You smile. You've felt a lot of wind during this journey, but this one, this one carries understanding. The sun has fully risen now, its rays stretching gently across the rooftops like golden threads unfurling through the weave of the waking city. And while the air is still bearable, you know what's coming. By noon, it will feel like the sun is standing directly over your shoulder, breathing heat into your shadow. But you're ready for it now, not because it has changed, but because you have. You step out of the sardib, rising slowly into the brightening world. Your eyes adjust. The quiet rituals of morning have given way to purposeful movement. Bazaars are stirring again, doors creaking open, voices warming up and greeting in barter. But you're not headed for the market this time. Your host gestures to follow him down a narrow alley, one you hadn't noticed before. It winds gently between tall mud brick walls, their tops lined with shards of glazed tile that shimmer like fish scales in the light. This is no random street. This is a Qanat, traditional Persian alleyway engineered not just for space, but for coolness. Here's how it works. The high walls cast deep shadows throughout the day, narrowing the angle at which sunlight can strike. The winding path breaks the wind into soft eddies instead of harsh gusts. At certain hours, these alleys become canyons of shade and breathe small miracles hiding in plain sight. You move through one now, noticing how the temperature dips with each step. It's subtle, but undeniable. It's like a secret handshake between bricks and breeze. You pass a woman sprinkling water on the ground with an old copper kettle, not out of superstition, but science. The water settles the dust and cools the surface, and as it evaporates, it tempers the air just enough to matter. She smiles at you, doesn't say a word. She knows you understand now. You reach the end of the kucha and emerge into another small courtyard of hayat, shared between two families. There's a fig tree here, its leaves the size of your face, casting a mottled shade across the stone tiles. A boy plays with a small wooden hoop, barefoot, while an elderly man naps with his head resting against a folded Abba wool cloak that's warm in winter and surprisingly breathable in summer. The courtyard isn't fancy. There are no fountains or mosaics here. It's just a square of open sky, a little tree, and a clay jug sweating quietly in the corner. But it's perfect because it's designed for life, not display. And this is the final lesson. In ancient Persia, cooling wasn't an appliance or an afterthought. It was part of the blueprint, a principle that began before a single brick was laid. From the wind catchers and Qanats, to the shabastans and sardabs, to the shaded alleys and urban-fused drinks. Everything worked in concert, not to chase the heat away, but to invite calmness in. There's a certain kind of wisdom in that. Historians still debate whether Persia's architectural genius was born more from climate or culture. But after walking these streets, lying beneath these stars, tasting that cold melon, and tracing the curves of painted tile with your finger, you know the answer is both, You walk slowly now, retracing your steps not because you must, but because you don't want it to end too quickly. You pass the rooftop again. It's the spot where you first met the stars as companions. You pass the bazaar, the one that smelled of rose petals and cumin. You pass the bog, the garden where the breeze came to kiss your skin. And you pass the sardib, where the earth itself gave you shelter. Each place is cooler than it should be. Not by accident, by art. You return to your host's home. Your pack is ready. Your sandals dusty, but your thoughts are clean, clear, cooled. One last sip of takma sharbati. One last wave of gratitude. Then you step outside, back into the world. It is, as promised, hot, but now you no longer dread it, because you've learned the secret that ancient Persia whispered into clay, water, and wind. Coolness isn't chased, it's created through rhythm, patience, through spaces built not to fight the world, but to feel it. And that is how, for thousands of years, the Persians stayed cool without air conditioning, not with machines, with grace. Lie down now. As the journey comes to a close, allow your breath to slow once more. Feel the gentle weight of sleep begin to settle across your shoulders like a soft shawl, as if you were once again lying beneath the stars on a Persian rooftop. The memories of cool towels underfoot, the hush of shaded alleys, and the quiet murmur of water drifting through a hidden Qanat of it lingers. Not loudly, but like the last notes of a lullaby fading in the air. Imagine the scent of dried basil in a quiet kitchen, the rustle of fig leaves in a courtyard, and the steady, rhythmic sway of a palm frond fan above you. These are not just details, they are comforts, carefully woven by time and intention, There's no need to hurry. There's no need to plan the next step. Right now, the world is simple. You are safe. You are cool. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Let the rhythms of ancient Persia carry you deeper into rest. Let the hush of wind catchers, the shadow of domes, and embrace of earth-built rooms drift behind your eyes like a dream slowly forming. The heat of the day is gone now, tucked away behind walls of clay and centuries of wisdom. All that's left is breath and stillness, and a slow, sweet slide into sleep. Good night, traveler, and may your dreams be as cool as water and as wide as a desert under stars.